and I am one of the co-chairs for IFMA's Education Committee. And today we have Chris Tiltons with us, who is an asset management consultant at Colonial Systems, who will be walking us through a webinar about opportunities to drive ROI through management of mobile workplace assets. So we'll get started in just a minute. I just wanted to give everyone a quick agenda of the webinar. Chris will be presenting for about 40 to 45 minutes, and then the last 15 minutes or so we typically save for questions. Throughout the duration of the webinar, everyone will be on mute, but if you do have a question that you think of, instead of saving it to the end, if you want to type it in the chat box as we go along, I will moderate those and read them out at the end for Chris to answer. And then we try to get people back to their busy workday by 1 o'clock. If anyone has questions, just feel free to send me a chat as we go along. Okay, so to introduce Chris, Chris has been the asset management consultant at Colonial Systems since July of 2016. His primary role is to help Colonial's clients achieve higher operational efficiency and cost reductions through the development and application of asset management programs for furniture and other workplace product inventories. Chris began his 17-year career in the office furniture industry with KISP as an on-site auditor creating client asset databases. He progressed to project management, soliciting and organizing database creation projects and managing the auditor teams. 2 years later, he moved into account management with increasingly complex responsibilities for operational strategy consulting and client training. He created, managed, and conducted programs for key clients throughout North America, providing training and consulting services customized to clients' needs and personally delivering training to more than 500 client employees. Chris established and maintained long-term strategic partnerships with more than 100 KISP accounts over a 10-year period. Chris, please take it away.
Thanks, Angela. Welcome and thank you for joining our webinar today. Our goal is to explore the challenges and strategies of managing mobile assets that may fall under the facility department's list of responsibilities. Things to consider before purchasing and not forgetting your FF&E assets. We recently enjoyed a great webinar for asset management of semi-permanent fixtures such as HVAC systems and garage doors. If you missed John Fortin's webinar and are looking to explore that topic, we can share the YouTube link with you after this presentation. This webinar will focus on mobile or movable assets such as furniture, equipment, and other items that can be easily deployed in a variety of areas within your building, campus, or across your international enterprise. Just so you have a face to accompany the Canadian accent, here is my headshot. As Angela mentioned, I worked for an asset management software developer and traveled extensively across North America to provide a wide range of services to several hundred clients. I'm looking forward to sharing some of that knowledge with you today. Here is a topical outline of our high-level discussion. If you're interested in exploring any of these topics further, please do not hesitate to contact me or post questions to the webinar chat box so we can address them towards the end of the presentation. Our discussion will start with basic terminology to ensure that we're all on the same page. We can then highlight some of the driving forces in the industry. Thereafter, we can review why you might consider this to be an important priority, how we can outline and implement a strategy, and what should we track. Finally, taking that knowledge so that you can self-assess and begin to apply this thought process to your own environments to determine what value may exist for you. During the course of this webinar, I will use the term assets, items, as well as FF&E interchangeably. All of them represent the different products that you would manage under this program. So what do we mean when we say asset management? Many people are unaware of the distinction between asset management and storage. ISO 55001 defines asset management as the coordinated activity of an organization to realize value from assets. And I think that's a good start. At its most basic level, storage is nothing more than a commodity, whereas asset management is a service and strategy that is applied to stored product. While all asset management programs have storage, most storage does not include asset management. With storage, the burden of managing assets is placed solely on the asset owner. They will likely have to visit the warehouse facility regularly to decide what to keep and who can redeploy which assets. Failure to actively manage these items will increase the total footprint. When we do not have a clear picture of our assets, there is also a natural instinct to keep items in case they might be needed in the future. Everyone fears removing an item from storage and then finding a need for it 2 weeks later. Without a tracking program in place, there is no information available to support a decision-making process around retiring items other than basic human instinct or dust accumulation on the assets themselves. The more items we store just in case, the higher our overhead costs will be. The best example that comes to mind was a service provider storing workstation panels for a company. While many of the assets were current, they had 4 warehouse bays that contained brand new workstation panels purchased 20 years ago, but never used and obviously forgotten. Since no one had ever managed that inventory, they paid a storage charge every month for 20 years and spent significantly more than the cost of those now obsolete panels. While it is a bit of an extreme example, there are many cases where the assets being stored are no longer relevant for use on site. Old fabrics not part of the current organizational color scheme, damaged product not worth fixing, or even storing product quantities in excess of what would be expected to use on site. These scenarios help outline the foundation as we draw a distinction between basic storage and asset management. In asset management, the service provider takes responsibility for optimizing not only how the product is stored, but also works towards the goals of the client in minimizing the storage footprint. The length of time assets will be stored before flagging them for retirement could be driven by depreciation thresholds or aging, where any stagnant item over a specific number of days is a candidate for retirement. Realistically, any other measurable metric can be used based on your needs. Unfortunately, while the upfront costs of implementing an asset management program can be quite clear, many of the costs associated with not implementing an asset management program are buried or bundled into the broad bucket of overhead or operations. This has always been a challenge when trying to perform a case study or white paper. Without accurate information, it is difficult to outline numerical examples for budgetary justification. It has been my experience that organizations that make this investment recognize the improvements to the internal pain points and notice a reduction of operational costs upon reflection, but almost all of them made the decision based on more qualitative metrics. Another important step is making the distinction between inventory management and asset management. Inventory is a simple quantity tracking approach to consumable goods and other products with a short lifespan. Pencils, sticky notes, and other office supplies would be good candidates for an inventory management program. We just need to know how many we have and where we can find them. They're also called current assets, since the company only expects to hold these items for a short time. Asset management is a much deeper level of tracking for products with longer lifespans and higher unit costs. As a result, it is worthwhile to track and manage them at a higher level. Asset management will provide a greater level of tracking and historical reporting to fulfill a wide variety of needs. You wouldn't want to take the necessary time to identify, barcode, scan, and manage a pencil because the value is too low and the lifespan is too short. Creating a logical dividing line between products assigned to an inventory management versus asset management will create a strong foundation for any initiative. While working with hundreds of service providers and end users, I encountered some common themes. These ideas were not exclusive to facility managers or warehouse managers, but highlighted a need to align the goals of the individual with the goals of the organization. Don't worry, we know where everything is. You may have even heard this yourself at some point. This is the most common pushback I receive to an asset management program, and I believe that in some cases it could be true. I have met people who are capable of retaining all the relevant information and rough quantity location for a small to medium-sized inventory. However, your typical stock of FF&E cannot be efficiently managed in this manner. Invariably, there's a volume level where even the most competent and experienced manager will become overwhelmed. This over-reliance on a single individual creates the organizational risk of losing key data, especially when the likelihood of this information being properly documented is very low. By centralizing information and allowing users to self-serve, we improve turnaround times and free up labor hours that would otherwise have been spent fielding questions. The second theme I've encountered is a little more serious. My job security increases if I hoard information within my organization. Obviously, I'm paraphrasing here. I've never actually met anyone willing to vocalize that statement, but it is an accurate translation of a disturbingly common behavior pattern I have observed. Let me start off by saying that I appreciate where these people are coming from. In an organization that may not understand or measure what is truly involved in keeping a department running, some individuals may take it upon themselves to purposefully engineer a feeling of being indispensable. I think that if we all stop to consider it, every one of us wouldn't mind feeling indispensable at some point in our daily working lives. It's an ego boost, and it gives people the confidence to focus on longer-term plans and strategies. However, it becomes toxic if that security comes at the price of the departmental or organizational performance. From a process standpoint, hoarding information means that all requests must bottleneck at a single individual. As an organization expands, evolves, and pace increases, this quickly becomes a choke collar to growth and performance of all related activities. A simple example is a height adjustable table in an employee office that is no longer functioning. If all services bottleneck at a single person and they're unavailable, then the employee's productivity will suffer, possibly even influencing the mood of others and damaging the reputation of the facilities department. By centralizing all key information using consistent and clear language into a database that is accessible to all relevant users, we can align the inventory performance with the goals of the organization. Technological integration into facility management has been a hot topic for some time. Smart light bulbs and smart temperature management, to name but a few. At its most basic level, all of these developments are focused on maintaining peak performance. Turn off building services when not in use and enable them only when they're actually needed to keep the usage level at its optimum point. By exerting a greater level of control over the physical environment, we minimize wasted energy consumption and encourage workers to achieve peak performance. The Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors suggested in a recent strategic FM conference that new technologies such as the Internet of Things and integrated approaches like building information modeling are moving the industry from a focus on cost to a focus on user experience. Asset management takes those same basic principles and applies them to the FF&E that companies use to create productive workspaces. Being able to increase the activity level for the current pool of assets will maximize the return on investment and provide additional flexibility in your budget. Having a significant amount of dead stock is essentially the same as wasted dollars in a budget. The product is not adding value to the organization. Physically centralizing storage for all excess assets is a logical strategy, but it can be difficult to implement without the assistance of strong procedures. I've seen on many occasions individual departments hoarding assets in vacant offices or vacant floors because of a lack of controls in the warehouse. They fear that if product is sent to storage, it will be redeployed by another department and effectively pilfer from their budget. This is in no way a jab at internally managed warehouses, but rather an honest assessment that every managed space faces challenges around controlling access to items in storage, tracking ownership, and managing who can initiate requests. By falling below expectations in these areas, departments take it upon themselves to guarantee continued ownership by using prime real estate for excess FF&E storage. This is costly in several ways. Product does not get redeployed quickly because a limited number of people know what is available or have access to the improvised storage area. The product is at an increased risk of damage by being stored improperly. There is also an increased operational safety risk, which can impact insurance coverage, as most office spaces are not insured for asset storage and related labor normally associated with a warehouse. And finally, office space is significantly more expensive than a warehouse. So even if everything goes according to plan, it still costs the organization a lot more money to retain that product. If stakeholders in your organization lose faith in the operational procedures of your current implementation, it becomes increasingly difficult to turn that around without major effort from the leadership team. Reputation itself becomes a powerful commodity in encouraging your organization to adhere to procedures. So how do we build this reputation? What assets do we focus on? What are the tangible benefits to your organization? Some of the key concepts in asset management include speed, responsiveness, and scalability of services. As we progress through this discussion, you will see how each can have a strong positive impact on an organization. We touched on this in our earlier discussion around technology, and now I'd like to dig in a little deeper. Just as ride-hailing and car-sharing services like Zipcar have increased the efficient use of vehicles, a strong asset management program can pull more value out of existing FF&E assets. We are already seeing a growth trend in the sharing economy or on-demand economy within real estate, from established brands like Regus to newcomers like Liquid Space and Pivot Desk. The way we view assets is changing. FF&E assets can be operated in a similar manner. If one department owns an asset that is not currently in use and another department needs that same asset, we can leverage technology to redeploy them in a timely manner and fulfill their need. Historically, this has been a challenge because companies lacked adequate tracking. Utilization efficiency is best understood within the context of a day-to-day example. In a medical facility, a diagnostic tool has just finished being used in one exam room and is now needed in another area of their campus. By implementing a proper tracking and workflow system, staff can identify where their equipment is located and retask them at the pace of their business. Without this, they would be unable to retask their equipment, and that need would either be delayed or unsatisfied. In both scenarios, the medical facility had made sufficient budgetary investment into their equipment, but it could only satisfy user demand in one of those examples. In a much less severe scenario, we could have a new employee starting on short notice. With asset management, we can deploy a chair, a desk, and a phone from excess stock that will fit into the space allocated for this employee. If we don't, we could lose the opportunity to leverage existing investments and either respond much slower and reduce the client experience, or over-order on FF&E, further drawing down the budget. Based on these examples, it should be clear that FF&E needs are based on both a time and a place. Since these items are difficult to track, you could have excess items in one area of your campus and a need for that exact item in another area, but not have sufficient information to respond in a timely manner. I'm confident that every facility manager could verify product availability without the use of a database, but not necessarily at the pace of their client's activity level. I'm sure that we've all noticed an increasing pace of business. Departments within each business are experiencing growing pressure to perform and respond quickly to rapidly evolving needs. I have observed a trend of increasing expectations for FM performance. Unfortunately, in some organizations, I've also observed a trend of decreased empathy for the challenges FM departments face on a daily basis. Increasing our utilization efficiency and creating a better user experience is a natural response to mitigate that pressure. Another contributor to stagnant assets is product condition. Items that are not usable as is tend to perpetually occupy space in storage and stagnate, essentially acting as a carrying cost drain on budgets. Building on the previous example, if the chair we wanted to redeploy needed cleaning before reuse on site, then an asset management program would provide the information needed to proactively service items worth investing in. Without this information, products will not be reused because they're not redeployable right now. The most common end result is that they're put aside and forgotten until the next need arises. But as long as these assets are not reusable at the pace of business, they will stagnate while the organization purchases new items instead. If a chair requires service but has an outdated color or functional issues, there is a cost threshold where an asset is no longer worth servicing and is at end of life. Just because an asset has been flagged for retirement does not mean that it's no longer adding value to the organization. Recycled products can reclaim residual value, donated products can generate a tax write-off, and both can be used as examples to strengthen the foundation of a broader corporate responsibility initiative. How well are we using our mission-critical assets? How much downtime did we have last quarter? Extracting information from an asset management program is the primary source of value for that implementation. Product availability and historical reporting are the two most common information requests from an inventory. Other needs can include depreciation calculations and warranty coverage. A strong application will also provide the ability to analyze product churn and usage trends. Establishing thresholds so that if an item has not been needed for X number of days, then it becomes a candidate for removal from the program and disposed, donated, or recycled as appropriate. On the other side of that analysis is comparing stocking programs versus lead times on new orders. If certain items are consistently in demand, it may be beneficial to introduce a stocking program and monitor activity levels. While some reports are obscure or very situational, departmental requests for equipment and furniture can be a daily occurrence. Do we have this chair in stock? Can you check to see if we have extra VoIP phones in storage? When we have a strong system in place, then all of these questions can be answered with confidence from your desk within 2 minutes or less. If you have a database implementation, then end users could even identify the assets they need and submit a request themselves. If you experience frequent interruptions to answer questions regarding product availability, then it becomes increasingly difficult to focus on a single task. By implementing a self-serve system and training, you can alleviate these requests, assuming the organization buys into the implementation. The major pitfall there is if you receive approval for starting asset management, but the phone calls still come in and you are still not supported in pushing back and forcing end users to self-serve. In that case, I've found that the asset management program will still add some value by allowing you to retrieve information quickly rather than having to physically verify items. The benefits are not as great, but it would still be an improvement. The actual gains made will vary from work environment to work environment, but even a small improvement will make a significant difference when you aggregate that over the course of a year. Another key benefit of asset management is the concept of cost avoidance. By having a strong program in place, we're able to make timely business decisions and avoid the cost of purchasing new. Therefore, each time we redeploy an asset from excess stock, we have avoided the cost of a new item. When analyzing the net benefit to an organization, I would compare the carrying cost of the inventory against the cost avoidance realized from the program. As long as the system is being used and there is churn in the inventory, then it will result in a net benefit. Having access to key information may shed light on previously unexplored opportunities for asset management. A robust application will allow you to scale up your service level or expand your scope without having to rebuild your database. So to summarize, a database that has information configured in a user-friendly best practices manner will make any facility more responsive and flexible to changing needs. Managing the true cost of ownership by tracking costs back to each department for purchases, managing service cycles for equipment, warranty coverage, depreciation, and end-of-life disposition. Actually reuse the excess assets in storage instead of leaving them stagnant. Respond quickly to requests by retrieving information electronically instead of having to physically assess each item every time a request is submitted. Minimize disruption to your schedule by empowering users to self-serve reports and delivery requests. At the end of the day, technology is simply a toolkit. Just as a hammer can be a valuable tool for a carpenter, a database system can be a valuable tool for an administrator. But in both examples, the value it adds really depends on the skills of the person wielding it. Processes and procedures can be a stronger influencing factor to the overall success of an implementation than the technology used. If you're unable to make the procedural changes necessary to track inbound and outbound movement, then I would recommend delaying the implementation until you have the necessary buy-in. The critical success factors to a strong implementation are controlling access to your products. If a lot of people can access your product, then you cannot guarantee accuracy, and confidence in the program will decline rapidly. Adding strong check-in and out procedures for the employees with access will ensure that any changes made are reflected in the inventory. By providing training, you can ensure that each contributor has consistent data entry. This is a lot more important than many new users realize, but it will become apparent as soon as you accumulate enough data to run reports. So how do we drive these requirements? And each facility will have some unique challenges. Before starting or sourcing a program, it is important to outline all of your goals and business needs. The scope typically has two components: in-use product currently deployed in the managed facility and excess product that can be stored in a variety of locations. You should not feel required to roll out your implementation to both immediately. Many programs are restricted to only tracking the warehouse, which is much easier to control. When determining how many items will be included in the program, it's important to keep in mind the ability to control access. There's less value in tracking assets that can be easily relocated by different individuals because you'll have to invest significantly more labor to maintain the accuracy of that inventory as it churns. Once you have established the requirements, you can then source service providers. One of the shortfalls to the current software market for facility management and asset management is that most of it was developed as specialty software, and therefore will typically not address every need. Software providers try to offer something for everyone, and typically are either good at managing service tickets and time tracking or inventories, but not both of those categories. To my knowledge, there is no software on the market that will allow a facility manager to completely fulfill the needs of work orders, internal costing and billing, inventory and asset management, as well as depreciation. Each tool will generally perform one of those needs very well and moderately for the rest. Employing multiple tools can be challenging because none of these custom applications will be able to speak to each other without a manual data export-import process. The information captured can be just as important as your processes. Here are the most common data fields for an asset management program. Barcode or serial number, this is the physical tag that we would affix to the asset. Product information, which includes manufacturer, part number, model number, manufacturer serial number, comprehensive description, which is a bit of a broad bucket. There are a host of best practices for this section and not enough time to review all of them, but I will say that you want to be consistent not only with the content of one description to the next, but also the sequence of each descriptor. This will pay big dividends in the future. The main concern here is ease of use. The more predictable and clear the descriptions, the more likely that end users will buy into the implementation. Physical condition has three main buckets: reusable as is, service required, and end of life. Again, in this section, there is a lot of best practices. Very quickly, I'd like to mention that you need to align the condition list with the decision-making thresholds of the users. What I mean by that is, if you have two identical assets, one has a very small scratch and the other one does not, does that trigger the use of a different condition? The answer depends on whether the client would treat the product differently. If they see no difference in deciding whether or not to use it, then there should be no distinction on the database. Anytime we add more information than is needed to make decisions, we're reducing the ROI for the program. Obviously, any overlap in the definitions of the condition list will cause confusion and a more subjective approach that could be inconsistent between one data collector and the next. Departmental ownership allows us to assign cost centers to track expenditures. Physical location works best when we drill down to the individual workstation for on-site implementations and individual pallets for warehouse implementations. The types of items tracked will obviously drive requirements, so additional fields can be added to this list as needed. When we combine technology with industry best practices, we can create a powerful tool for both the warehouse and front office. To help illustrate this concept, I took an image of the tools our warehouse team employs when creating and updating FF&E inventories. We use barcodes and a scanner to enter information, which is common in this industry. However, what separates the system is the ability to preload the available choices for the data collectors in the warehouse. You can just imagine what would happen if each data collector could freeform type into each description field. 4 damaged chairs could easily result in descriptions like torn seat, seat torn, ripped fabric, as each data collector introduces their own unique wording to our inventory. Data inconsistency severely limits your reporting capabilities and the value of the system, no matter how expensive your software package is. By preloading the available options and forcing a scan for each data entry point, we not only create consistent information, but we also eliminate typos and other basic errors. Finally, by having all this information available on demand, every user can access it and make decisions at the pace of their workload. The physical layout of the asset managed space is also an important feature of a best practices implementation. I've seen a wide range of naming conventions used to identify locations in warehouse racking. This example illustrates my best practices approach. By separating the location code into a predictable format based on the rack layout, it becomes intuitive for the staff and easier to train new staff on the system. You will notice that there's 4 elements to the code: row, bay, level, and position. The row indicates which side of the aisle my asset is in. The bay indicates how far down the aisle it is, and the level indicates the elevation, and the position indicates which pallet within that bay I can find my asset. By providing information in that sequence and incorporating alphanumeric characters, it makes the information easier to read and digest. The more intuitive your naming convention is, the more accurate your data entry will be, and the easier it will be to make changes to your rack layout as your volume grows and needs evolve. If we're looking at an inventory at an office building, the same principles would apply. We would leverage the existing CAD drawings to create consistent location codes. The only issue there would be that the drawings generally do not include a code for every area where FF&E is in use, so some additional locations will likely have to be added. Typically, the naming convention would be comprised of building ID, floor number, workstation cluster, and individual workstation. Your scope of implementation will drive the benefits to the organization. I would recommend that if you're going to do this for the first time on your own, that you do not extend your reach beyond what you can reasonably manage and control. I would recommend starting with 1 or 2 asset categories. All of your equipment, all of your financial record storage, potentially all of your furniture, but you could start off by restricting it to only your chairs and grow from there. The last thing you want to do is implement some of an asset category, like all of the furniture on floor 7, but nothing on floor 6 and 8. As items move from floor to floor and between the warehouse and on-site, the lines between what is in scope and what is not will blur, and it will become very challenging to maintain control. In addition, the information needs will be different for each asset category. By restricting the implementation in this way, we simplify the data collection process. This makes training easier and less overwhelming for newer users. It is difficult to compile a complete listing of all items that would benefit from an asset management program, but the most commonly tracked items are furniture, demountable walls, computers, copiers, fax machines, medical equipment, networking equipment, financial records, and artwork. However, each business can have their own special assets that are needed for daily use within the organization and could be added to this list. Now that we've reviewed a wide range of topics in asset management, here are some thought starters to assist in identifying an opportunity within your own organization. Anytime there's a change to the layout or number of employees at your facility, you will generate excess assets. Almost every new installation generates a few excess items. A relocation or reduction can also generate a lot of excess assets. Identifying and estimating the amount of excess assets will allow you to plan and determine what the best use is for this product. What is the age of the items? What are the expectations for future growth or change? What is the current condition of the items? All of these factors help drive your decision. In many cases, it is worthwhile inventorying these items simply to have a record of what was disposed or donated for tracking purposes, or to assist your finance team in writing those assets off the books. Another approach would be to ask yourself if you currently feel in control of your FF&E, either assets in use, excess, or both. If you feel that items are being used in a timely manner, non-performing assets are kept to a minimum, then you may not have reached a high enough volume of activity to justify an asset management implementation of some type. Finally, if you receive frequent information requests and feel that a high percentage of your time is being spent fielding questions regarding the current status, historical churn, or future use of your FF&E, then an asset management program may be the solution. I'm obviously an advocate for this, having seen the benefits firsthand, and I'm confident that organizations have the ability to self-manage their assets if their staff are properly trained and supported. Because the application base of this program is so broad, the benefits of asset management can be very situation specific. I would say that the universal benefit of asset management would be operational efficiency, or put another way, it provides accountability and control to the internal operations of an organization. By managing FF&E, we can free up budgetary dollars that would otherwise be wasted on holding non-performing assets and improve the user experience to repair any damaged internal relationships. If we don't know what we have or how long it's been sitting around, we do not have the ability to make informed decisions. If we have proper aging reports, we can thoughtfully retire assets and quickly redeploy others to keep each department running as smoothly as possible. If we can reuse a single asset 2 to 3 times, our cost avoidance value will quickly exceed the cost of the implementation and justify the investment in the program. Organizations are not static. If anything, the pace of change has increased. An asset management program empowers the facilities team to scale up or down much faster, as well as provide valuable financial information in the event of a consolidation or acquisition. When Bank One and JP Morgan were negotiating their merger, I participated in the Bank One asset management inventory to boost their fixed asset valuation and influence the stock swap. Obviously, there were many factors in that calculation, but by having a comprehensive listing of all fixed assets and their relative values, we were able to arm Bank One with the necessary information to negotiate a higher price on the swap. Without a detailed listing of assets, the negotiation team would not have been able to use that as leverage. In working with many organizations of various sizes, I'm a strong believer that increasing the visibility of FF&E assets and sharing information across the organization will noticeably increase the net value for their investments. A database is an ideal approach to centralizing information and allow various stakeholders to self-serve with reports and other queries. This lightens the burden on the manager and allows them to focus on team activities and processes. While I'm confident that each of you could create your own program, enlisting the help of an experienced team will dramatically shorten the time required to realize benefits and minimize the risk of various pitfalls along the way. If you're interested in learning more, I would like to mention that Colonial Systems offers technical consulting and asset management warehousing services to clients across New England. If you have any project-specific questions, or if you're interested in having an exploratory discussion of the temporary storage or asset management programs offered, please do not hesitate to contact me. Other than that, I'd like to thank you very much for joining me today.
Great, thank you, Chris. That was awesome. So one thing I forgot to mention at the beginning was that we were looking to get some feedback via the chat. I have a question in here that Chris has posed. If you could take a minute just to review it. So the question is, what percentage of your day is spent fielding information requests regarding your company's assets? So we can take a second to think about that and type it into your answer into the chat. That would be great. And then also feel free to write any other questions that you may have. We'll give you a few minutes to do that. Chris, maybe while people are thinking and typing, do you just want to explain the reasoning for asking this question?
Just a curiosity more than anything. Really, I see so much variety in the workload and work balance for different facility managers in different industries or different parts of the country. So I was curious in terms of what facility managers in this area were experiencing in terms of a workload balance for fielding these types of requests.
Okay, we have one response so far, 75%. Pretty high.
That's terrible. I'm sorry to hear that.
Oh, and then a follow-up. Very new to the whole FM and asset management area, so maybe I'm spending more time on it than usual.
Yeah, and that's common. I mean, as you're scaling up within a new facility or a new company, obviously you don't have all of these answers at your fingertips. So that will level off. I mean, 75 is really quite high. But you know, I wouldn't be surprised if some of these larger facilities are requiring a similar amount of time being spent.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we have a question that came in from John Fantasia. When talking about end of life, is there a time frame that a company cannot claim asset depreciation on their taxes?
That's pretty complex. State by state, you're going to have different requirements for your financial reporting, and also if the company is publicly traded or privately held, the IRS will provide the depreciation schedules based on different types of assets. So obviously vehicles would be depreciated on a more accelerated basis than furniture or other assets within the building, but there's always a certain amount of flexibility that your accounting department will have in terms of choosing which depreciation schedule best reflects the equipment that they're using. So I don't mean to sound evasive, but the answer can become very dependent. I would say on average, though, 5 to 10 years would be your window of opportunity.
Thank you. Okay. We still have some time if anyone else has any questions or comments for Chris. Okay, if not, we will wrap up. Chris, thank you again. This was really great. And for anyone who wants to go back and rewatch any of the webinar, we will post it onto our YouTube channel, so you can refer back to it if needed. And thank you very much, and we'll see you guys at our next webinar, hopefully. Have a great day.